Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Welcome to the Groovy podcast. We are broadcasting, actually, my name is Ken Kousen, and we are podcasting or broadcasting this time live from Great Conf in the U.S. in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We're on the campus of, what is it, University of St. Thomas, I think it is?
Yep.
And with me is someone I'm very pleased to say is a good friend, but also the Groovy core committer, one of the, I think you've done more commits on the project than anybody else, right?
Yep.
Paul King, one of my personal heroes, I have to say. You know, I I say that every time, but it's still true. Okay. So welcome, Paul.
And I'm happy to be talking to the newly crowned Grails rock star. Is that the right terminology?
I think that's what they call it.
Yeah. So still warm from the handing over ceremony or whatever.
Yeah, I was at the second winner last year. Eric,
that's right.
Helgeson won, right? And he's here, of course. So both of us are here. Oh boy! But Jeff Brown totally surprised me. He told me yesterday to expect a message. Actually, it was the day before I was going to be there. He asked me when I was getting in, and then he had Jen, another OCI person, send me an email. Says, we want to say something about the Groovy podcast. We want to advertise the Groovy podcast on OCI. That's the ploy they used to tell me this. And I was naive enough to think, wow, we might, double our listeners. We could go from 10 to 20 or whatever. I mean, we could really make an improvement here. So I thought, sure. So she sends me this message and asks, about how many Groovy classes have you taught, and Grails and Gradle, and when did you start using it, and all this stuff. And I'm like, don't they know this stuff or whatever? I mean, I've talked to them before. What the heck? So I was supposed to get back to her right away, but I hit a flight delay in DC. There was thunderstorms, and then there was this long queue to get out. And I finally get into my hotel room at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, I'm going to go fall asleep. No, all right. I promised I'd get back to them. So I sent him the message. And of course, the funny part is that the next morning, I'm thinking, I don't know if I really want to go to Jeff's keynote. I know what he's going to talk about.
Seen it before.
But I did promise I'd go, and he is going to say something about the Groovy podcast. And so I go over to the room, and Jeff comes over to me and says, I might ask you to come up and say a few words about okay. And then that's what happened, right? He goes through the whole talk. He brings me up to say something about the podcast, and I answered a couple questions, and I mentioned the homepage, And the shocking part, the most shocking part of the entire event was he said, "How many people in here have heard of the Groovy podcast?" And just about every hand went up.
Yep.
That blew my mind. I couldn't believe that many people at least knew about it.
So all 10 people were in the room?
Yeah, exactly. So I go up there, and he hands me this Grail, and I don't have it with me now, but on the next podcast. So, because of course I have to hold this over Baruch's head, right?
Oh, well, yes.
I got to give Baruch a hard time about it because, I mean, A, it's cool, and B, any opportunity to give Baruch a hard time is a good thing.
For sure.
Yeah. So at any rate, I'll show it on the next podcast or whatever. I was shocked. I was very happy, mostly because it's kind of a lifetime achievement type of thing. It's not because of any particular thing I did.
You can retire any day now.
Oh yeah. That'll work. I think my wife will be happy about that. But it's more like
your bank manager tells you not just yet. Stay a little bit longer.
Oh yeah, the financial people will go, no. The people holding the mortgage probably like, no, that'd be bad. But it's more like it's saying all this time I've spent in the Groovy community is valued, and I love spending time in the Groovy community. And Grails people and everything, and it's like, these are my peeps, Yeah. And I really enjoy this. So it's not like I was thinking to myself, it's not like I haven't done anything. I have done a lot of work in this, but it's fun, It's not all joy, obviously, but I like the people. I like the community. I like doing this.
Yeah. So whether you love or hate the technology, the community can't be beaten, can it? So it's just a fantastic community.
Okay. And the technology is good with certain exceptions we're going to get to. Exactly. Right. So, at any rate, that's what happened, and I was
part of getting the cup was you weren't supposed to bring those up anymore.
Oh yeah, right. Because that was the problem. Is I had all these slides in my presentation, my first talk I was going to do, and I had mildly sarcastic things, and I'm thinking I better not say that anymore, right? I'm perfectly willing to admit I'm perfectly happy to be bribed. Feel free. My price is remarkably low. really surprising.
I'm saving up.
Well, you don't need to worry about it, but others, Baruch, for example, okay, so that leads
his price is a bit higher. Is that right?
Well, I don't know what his price is.
No, his price for you.
For me, yeah. I mean,
double special deal for him.
Because it depends. If he's asking me never to give him a hard time again, I don't think he can afford that.
Okay. Yeah.
Whereas if he just wants me to say nice things about Baruch or Jay Frog, I can live with that. I mean, I never used the, whatever. Okay.
We use it to release every version of Groovy. So.
Okay, so that's good. Hey, Baruch will be happy to hear that, which he knows, of course.
And the Apache stuff as well. We send it out over both. We keep the Apache people happy, and we keep the JFrog.
He may not want to hear that, but the Apache people want to hear that, especially because Groovy's an Apache project, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So
we cover all bases. We keep everyone happy.
So how have you been enjoying the conference in general?
It's been great. Yeah, I really love. Well, obviously, hearing about all the wonderful things that are going on is always good fun. But as we just mentioned, the community is a really great community, and it's just great to be in.
Certain exceptions, yeah, but going on. Present company accepted.
Oh, sure. So it's just been really great to catch up with many people that I've been working with for quite a few years now, and just also just speaking to people who are using the technology out in production and loving it. It's really helping their businesses succeed and so on. So it's just great to get all that feedback and interactions.
Now, you gave the keynote this morning on what's in 2.5 and what's coming in 3.0.
Yep.
And I mean, I've actually spent time playing with it and reading about it, and I still saw a lot of things in there I was not familiar with. I had no idea there were so many more AST transforms in 2.5.
Yep.
That I was not aware. I knew about the macro capability, but do you want to comment on any of the AST transforms that are in there now?
Yeah, actually so a very key design principle of Groovy has always been extensibility. And the whole reason that the AST transforms were there was so that if the Groovy language isn't by itself in its raw form isn't doing everything you need, there's now an easy way to make an extension to get whatever functionality you need. And that's why AST transforms were put in place. And what we're seeing now is the fruits of that some few years down the track, where lots of people have now realized that that's a great way to have new capabilities in the language. And some of those are being contributed back, and we've sifted through the ones that we think are of applicable to a wide range of scenarios, and they're the ones that have been merged in. So it's really neat that these things are showing up, and they're kind of, another thing that Groovy's tried to do is pain points in Java. Well, that solves some of those, right? And these transforms are popping up, and it solves another problem that we've had for years, and this solves it really elegantly, and it captures all the best practice. But it's so easy to use. I don't need to know what the best practice is necessarily. I can just go use a transform and it does all the work for me.
When I talk to Java developers, I always show them at Canonical, for example, which that's now a composite annotation for all three. And for equals and hash code and toString, and you were calling it tuple constructor. I've been calling it tuple constructor. I don't know, whatever it is. Way, But I like that now that you can say, like, include names on the canonical, and it passes it through to the underlying ones, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there was something else you were able to do with that now that you weren't able to do before.
Well, if you don't like the things that as we've defined it, you just make your own. Make your my canonical, and get rid of tuple and put a map constructor in if that's what you always want to use.
But there are additional properties I thought you added to canonical. That's what I was trying to remember.
Well, yeah, lots. Across all of the transforms now, there's much more consistent usage of all the annotation attributes. So there used to be, like, I can't remember which one it was on, but there was like an all names annotation attribute, which hardly anyone ever needs to use. But we used to throw away names that would have a $sign in, because they're kind of internal names that we wanted to hide those things away. We won't put that in your toString. If you have a property, secret $log or something, we'd hide that away, and that actually can hide away things like metaclass stuff and other stuff we generate, right? So it was a good reasons for why we do that. But if you're not got our internal stuff, you've got your own class, and you've for some reason made a Java legacy class that's got a property of that nature, and you want it to appear, you can just put an all name, set that to true, and off away you go. And that was just on one or two annotations that someone bumped into that problem at some point in their life and said, oh, I'm trying to use just .toString, and here's what I'm trying to do, and we added it. And then we kind of thought, well, why should it be there and not in the other places it makes sense to be? And so on the whole, it's now much more consistent. I'm not saying it's fully consistent everywhere, but on the whole, all the places where we thought it made sense to add all those things, right across the board, you'll see all properties, all names, different things that make sense.
Well, I was saying when I show Java developers, I bring up @canonical, I bring up @delegate because that always is a big deal. @delegate, I like does the delegation design pattern. You put it on an attribute, and then the API of the attribute is exposed through the container. But you said now in 2.5 you could put @delegate on a getter method. Was it?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got more fine grained control, if you will.
Yeah, and so some people were the delegate might change each time you call it, or there's some round robining, or it might be lazily evaluated. So it's not a field that's set until you start using it, and the getter is the thing that initializes it all.
Right.
And so they were kind of stuck. They couldn't use the delegate.
And the other one I always show them was the add immutable. Yeah. Because that makes a big impact. People are like, really? Because it's so hard to make a Java class immutable.
Yes. And we've taken that a huge step further.
Right.
So immutable's been there for what, since 2.1 or something?
Something like that. It's a long time.
Maybe 2.0. Well, anyways, not long after we had AST transforms, it was one of the first things that was brought in. And yeah, the Josh Block rules
in effective Java, right?
They stand the test of time, and they still are the appropriate way to do those things. But some of the hard-coded stuff we do for free might not necessarily be the way some people wanted to do that. And so we had huge numbers of requests, so 30 or 40 different requests over the last couple of years on, can you change immutable to do this? Can you change immutable to do that? And yes, we could try to keep growing it and growing it into this big monster and so on and so forth, but it would have looked ugly, and again, it would be limited to the things that we added, and people would sort of be stuck. So we split it into its fine-grained parts, and it's a meta annotation as well.
There's a base immutable, and there's all those other pieces.
Yeah, yeah, and so you can say, so one of the things that you want to do, you want to do defensive copy in, defensive copy out for lists, for instance. And we do that, but we use which is when we were doing it, it was the most commonly used collection libraries around.
Sure.
But there's quite a few collection libraries now around, and people might have a corporate standard that says we use Guava collections, we use some other.
Right.
And so now you can just, in a very fine-grained level, you can say, yep, I'm going to slot in my own property handler, and I'm going to use the Guava collections when I'm doing the defensive copy in, defensive copy out, and a few lines of code, and now you've got a totally brand new immutable with hardly any work on your part, and it's still got all the wonderful properties, but it's now got a different flavor for that particular scenario.
Is that the one that also had the pre and the post properties as well? Was that in that immutable, or is that in something else?
It percolates up to add immutable, but it's coming both tuple constructor and map constructor.
That's
now,
what it was.
So tuples had pre and post added. Map constructor is a new one for 2.5, and it's got them there as well. So if you put them in that immutable, it actually floats down to both of those.
But the idea there is you can assign a closure or a method called reference
closure,
the closure to pre and post attributes, and it will run the pre-closure before doing the assignment of the properties, and then run the post after it's done, right?
Correct, yeah.
Which is, I mean, I didn't realize a lot of people wanted that, but as soon as you mentioned it, I thought, oh yeah, I bet that'd be a neat capability.
Yeah, you don't need it often, and it doesn't need to do much frequently, but just the ability to do that means, using immutable was, it was just a showstopper for some people because they had to have that capability. They've got some corporate requirements that every customer they create, the name field has to look like this, or the address has to not be empty, or some particular requirement that they needed. And when you were using an immutable, there's no way to ensure that. So they'd have to do lots of work to try to do that. And many of them just said, "Oh, we won't use immutable. We'll have to roll our own," and they'd code it all up. Now they can easily do it. So that's great. So
you mostly, when you talked about 2.5, you mostly spent time on those annotations. There were a whole bunch of AST transforms.
Yep. And macros was
macros, of course, because we talked about that before. That all came from Sergei Egorov, right? And that was the idea of being able to write an AST transform using methods that looked more like Groovy. You know, instead of having to write the tree manipulation code or whatever you call it.
Yeah, so Groovy's compiler converts your source code into an abstract syntax tree.
Yeah.
And you had to be a guru in that AST stuff to do the transform stuff. Now, you still need a little bit of knowledge, but the bulk of what you're doing could potentially just look like Groovy code. So if you're trying to create a method in your mind, you're thinking, I need these 10 lines of Groovy code added, you can write 10 lines of Groovy code, and that's what gets added. And you can just inject little bits of interpolated variables here and there for stuff that you need to, because you don't necessarily want hard-coded code all the time. You want variables and things.
Yeah, that $V.
Yeah. So the placeholder.
And I think all that's documented in certainly there's something in the release notes, but I think it's actually in the regular guide as well.
Correct.
Right, yeah. So those were the big things in 2.5.0. I'm going to take a tiny bit of credit for the existence of 2.5.1 because, because I tried to run.
Believe me, you weren't the first on the list to notice a couple of issues.
Yeah, and that's going to lead us to some of the discussions about 3 going on. And of course, what was happening.
We'll finish the 2.5 discussions around what you're just talking about, because it'd be good for people to know that they should be they should be skipping 2.5.0 pretty much, and if they're
right. So the run I hit, now others hit other issues, I suppose. I mean, the only major issue I hit is I took my regular Gradle builds, the ones that I had that were on 2.4, and I moved it to 2.5. And the problem was on Java 1.8, everything ran without an issue. So as long as I stuck with Java 8, which the vast majority of the industry is still doing, I think I wonder how frustrated Oracle's getting about this, but we'll see. But there were no issues there. Everything ran just fine. When I moved to Java 10, again, according to Oracle, there is no 9 anymore. We're on 10 now, right? Then we hit
the time. It's not 11 yet. No,
right. Then we hit the modularization problem, and the module problem is that was two ramifications of it. One is that all Gradle builds throw up this warning, but we'll come back to that. The real problem is that the JDK has removed the javax.xml.bind module from the base SDK.
That's right.
Right. And therefore, and it turned out Groovy was expecting that module in the library. So even when go ahead.
The sad part is only in 2.5 have we added the Jaxby extensions.
Oh, really?
Correct.
I mean, they hadn't been in there prior?
They hadn't been in there prior.
Oh, my goodness. I didn't even know that. I mean, again, it never came up for me as a problem.
Yeah.
So the Jaxby extensions got added. Then you tried to run on Java 10, and they didn't exist anymore.
Because they've decided that Jaxby's a Java EE thing. It's
right.
Not, it's not an SE thing anymore. So.
Which they don't talk to the people I talk to. You know what I mean? That's not my experience. But all right, fine. But the problem is if you're running in Java, then there's a flag to add a module. Right? To add something to the module path, no big deal. -- add - module, I think it is, But there's something. But what do you do when you're in Groovy? And there was no corresponding flag. And even worse, Gradle had nothing, Now, all the advice to how to fix this in Java projects involved adding the actual jar files, the actual dependency for the API and the implementation.
Provided you're not running on Java 8, in which case you don't want those in your class path.
Exactly. So you had that problem too. And of course, what do you do in Groovy? So I struggled with it. I banged my head against the wall for a couple of days, and that's about a day longer than you should in the Groovy world, So first I contacted Ben Mushko, formerly of Gradle, who left, and he came up with this bizarre Gradle build file. Bizarre to me. I mean, I've been teaching Gradle, and there was
you'll see code very similar to that in the Groovy build. So you would have you had another source, you could have potentially got that. But I mean, what he suggested was very good.
Oh, it worked. I mean, he had an idea, but it's stuff, basically, I never would have come up with it looking at the user docs and knowing what I know. I mean, it involved understanding of how these things were processed under the hood.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I'm also going to take a chance and I'm going to contact Paul. I thought I'd send it to you. And of course, you came back with, well, add a configuration that brings this in when you need it. And I wrapped it in an if statement, and suddenly things were working. And I thought, well, this is a much cleaner solution. I wonder if I have to do this all the time. At which point you said, if you wait till tomorrow, Groovy 2.5.1 will fix the problem.
So it's fixed now from the dependency side.
Right.
We didn't get all the stuff fixed for the if you're running the Groovy console on 10 and stuff like that.
Right.
You still got to do a few tweaks if you don't want to get some warnings.
You have to set an environment variable and all that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So with 2.5.2, we believe, which is ready to come out soon, whenever we hit the button, probably try to fix a few more bugs and then we'll push that out. That should go away for all the command line tools as well.
Hallelujah. I mean, because I mean, I apparently am ahead of the curve in finally deciding, okay, it's time to upgrade to Java 10. You know, I mean, it's time to run things under that.
That's right. It's going to be expired.
Yeah, I mean, 11's out in September, right? You know,
it's going to be expired in a couple of weeks. I guess I should try it.
And I wrote a stupid book on Java. I ought to be able to, you know, I feel like that. By the way, I have my 2 repositories for that book. I have the book for the Java 8 recipes and a book for the Java 10, which was 9 recipes. Okay. And Java 9 one, of course, I put it in modules. Okay. In Java 8, I thought, well, if I just put a module-info.java file in there, you know, I could declare a module, and supposedly the Java 8 compiler would ignore that. Well, that turned out not to be the case.
There's ways to make it be hidden under the covers, but you got to do some little bit of work.
I couldn't figure out what it was. I'd have to Google it. So I'm currently maintaining 2 separate repos.
I can give you some hints, but I'll do that
offline. Yeah. I did, in fact, recompile all my code and run it under Java 10, and it all ran fine. So, I mean, I didn't have any issues with it. Yeah. But this is going to be a transition for much of the industry. And I still believe that the creators, the maintainers of the language of Java do not really recognize the disruption they have caused and will be causing, you know.
Unless they do.
Oh, you think they don't care, or you think they want this disruption?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
I don't know. Yeah,
I can dream up some conspiracy theories, but
this is
I don't have
any
evidence to back any of them up.
Anyway, so your point is that 2.5.2 will remove even the necessity to modify my Gradle build file. What's it going to do?
No, so if you're wanting to use Groovy with the Java 10, you'll be fine in many scenarios. The thing where you'll still need to do the little, like the configuration trick, will be if you want to create a build that works across 8 and 10, for instance.
Oh, okay.
You'll still need a little bit of working.
So we'll have to document that somehow. I mean, either a blog post or something. But
so in the release notes, it currently points you to the build thing to that, you know.
The release notes for 2.5.2. That's why I haven't seen it yet.
Well, they're not published yet.
Yeah, so, which is good. So I was going to say if I missed something after I was digging in like that, I would have felt really bad. But okay, so that's there. Now, of course, the other problem is the big one, and it's one of the things that's going to be addressed on the path to 3.0, and it's the fact that now you can't have the same packages in 2 different modules. You also have this caching going on that's violating the reflection capability. Or it's all a symptom of -- illegal - access equals warn.
Yeah, well, there's two parts to it. Yeah. One's the split packages.
Yeah, the split packages. Thank you.
And so Groovy is structured in modules, and they were never meant to be Java modules.
Right.
And we've got a choice of, we could just munge Groovy all up into one fat jar and never look at modules ever again.
Which I bet libraries do. I bet libraries are going to go that way.
In fact, that's the strategy for quite a few. Yeah. And even Maven itself is talking about. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not making it fat, but never doing the module thing for Maven.
Yeah.
It's just anyway.
It's like the old C++. The C programmers who said, "I'm adopting C++." They took their entire program, put it in a main method. In a class. Right. Yeah.
So anyway, that's a whole podcast issue in itself.
Right.
So the split packages things, we've got a way that we can make our thing conform, and where there's probably 2 options we're down to choosing between, and they've got slightly different impacts on the user base. So do we do a bit of extra smarts in the compiler and make people have much less pain, but require them to maybe recompile, or do we require them to convert some of their import package names and stuff, or not? So we can make the compiler, for instance, we're going to move XML Slurper into groovy.xml as its package rather than Groovy util.
Right.
Now, we can make groovy.xml.star an auto import.
Oh.
If we wanted to.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. And then people can just recompile up under the new view and they'll be fine. We can allow people to leave their inputs as they are, and the compiler will just know whenever I see Groovy util XML slurper, I'll just rename that to Groovy XML slurper.
Magic going on under the hood, yeah.
Yeah. So there'll be a list of the legacy renames that will automatically do for you, and but it'll exist in the right place at the right time. But that breaks binary compatibility if you've already compiled your class.
Yeah,
and it's got, if you've got a return type that says groovy.util.xml slurper, there's still a binary compatibility issue there. So do we nudge people a bit further and say, no, you will have to recompile and it will be binary breaking. And then we can make the compiler much dumber because he'll have done the work anyway. And we'll warn you, and we'll have deprecated versions of stuff. And we can put a Groovy util XML slurper back in core so that if people don't go and do our advice, it'll still be there, but you won't be using the Groovy XML module. You'll just be using the Groovy core module.
And you'll update
and it's deprecated, and it'll go away eventually. And so at some point you have to convert. But it's up to you then to pick, do you want it? But yeah, and so that's one part of the equation, and that's all well underway, and it's just there's just a bit of engineering work to do and some discussions to be had because we want all our users to know what's going to be coming in 3 and be prepared for it, and not face the 2 days of banging your head against the wall, which you had to do for the XML bind stuff. So that's all good. The other part of the equation is Groovy does some smarts for its meta class when it's looking up stuff at the start. When it starts up, it says, "Oh, I don't want to be really inefficient when you're using meta class, so I'm going to go sniff around, find all the info that I need, cache it all away."
Yeah, the warning is always about some cache class. Yeah.
But if you go and fix that cache class, it goes to the next thing. So there's a few there's a few places where it'll be impacted. But anyway, yeah. So again, we've got some good solutions to that we'd prefer not to do, which dumb it down or make it slower or whatever. And we're working on some other solutions, and some of those involve having discussions with Oracle. And
really?
Yeah, yep. There's some discussions that are taking place about, because they've said, the story is, don't use unsafe anymore, don't use this, and we'll provide you alternatives. Well, yeah, we've shown them our scenario and there is no alternative. And they said, well, we might give you an alternative, but yeah, don't count on it yet. So if we keep going back to them enough times, there might be an alternative. And that would make our lives easier and simpler, but we can't rely on that being there. So we're looking at other alternatives, but it takes us time to go through them. And it's one of those things that it does take time, because you progress things to a certain extent and fix one part of it, and then the next layer of the onion now appears, and you say, oh yeah, we have to now fix the next part of it as well. And so it's taking some time, and it will, and we haven't got I can't tell you how long it's going to be or the final solution, but what I can say is that in Copenhagen, GreatConf EU, Jochen and I had some really good discussions about
Jochen Teodoro.
Yeah, Black Drag.
Black Drag. Yeah.
We had some good discussions about the fertile areas that we're trying to head down in this space, and yeah, I'll just have to say, watch this space, and hopefully we'll have some good news.
Well, I think all anybody really needs is to know that this is being worked on. It will be resolved, and it will be resolved before it breaks. Before they say we can't do this anymore.
So 2.5 works. With some internal tweaks that I do to use a experimental version of
It's a workaround. Yeah.
It works fine on 11. So it's not. Oh. So yeah, there's even 2.5 isn't in risk of these things actually going away anytime soon. It still has the warnings. But
well, the warnings, I honestly wonder why Gradle isn't doing more about that. That was what surprised me when Baruch talked to both Guillaume and Cedric Champeau, because I know Cedric is at Gradle and he knows Groovy really well, but I know that Gradle has, I don't want to say a love-hate relationship with Groovy, but they seem to sometimes forget where they came from. They don't push it.
I would sort of phrase it as they're kind of focused on particular things
That's so much more diplomatic. That was very nice of you, and again, the way,
but they need to be, if the path they're heading down, they do need to have some focus. But
they're really going to like you. Yeah, that's good. Whereas with me, but see, my fallback is just to assume nobody's listening anyway, so I can say whatever I want. But honestly, my problem is the Gradle warning constantly. That horrible warning comes up whenever I do a Gradle build. When I run Groovy from the command line, but we have to mention your new flag.
Oh, well, it's been there for a long time.
Really? I didn't know it existed.
Only in 3. It's
only
just been put
but this flag that will be added. Wait a minute.
It's in 2.5 now, but it's only just been added to 2.5.
Yeah. So if you're running from the Groovy command line, if you say Groovy and then
if you're using Groovy doc, Groovy C, Groovy shell, Groovy console
too.
Yeah.
So you set is it a flag or a system property? Environment variable.
Yeah.
And what was it called again?
It's just it's got a temporary name of.
Yeah, but it's great.
Groovy turn off Java warning or something like that.
Yeah, Groovy turn off Java warning.
It's trying to indicate that this is a temporary workaround.
Yeah, we know. Don't worry about it. It's going away. But yeah, if you're getting sick of looking at the warning,
don't want to see the warnings, they can put the hush flag on and. And
I think that's great. Now, again, so the problem will be solved in 3, and 3, even though we don't know when it'll be out because we collectively as a community, we don't know how much time that will be allocated to working on it, right? How many people will be involved, how much time they're going to be able to dedicate to it, and the number of things you want to fix. But we do know that before suddenly Oracle makes illegal access equals error, before they finally say, that's it, you're done, this will be fixed.
Yeah, well, we know what our fallback is, which is the slow version we don't want.
Right.
And if push comes to shove and it's going away, we'll fall back to that.
And say, we'll fix the speed later or whatever, but at least it'll run now.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, all right. So, again, that's just very reassuring to hear that somebody's got a plan.
Yeah, it's just a slow process.
Yeah.
I mean, I know people are frustrated that things aren't happening quicker, but I'm just as frustrated because I've got a big to-do list and I'm excited about all the stuff that's getting done, but I just see this long list and there's plenty more to happen.
Well, which is another reason to appeal to the community to say, look, I mean, if you don't know what to do, you're willing to tell people, hey, these are our priority lists. Here's the list of issues. And you even probably be willing to review or to help or whatever,
willing to accept pull requests.
Yeah. If you're willing to give it a try.
Oh yeah. No, I think you'll find the Groovy dev community is not one that's going to bite people's heads off if they have a go and try to do something. We can say, well,
which means I ought to find an issue and see what I can do, but I haven't yet. But we'll see. So at least things are moving along that path, and we know roughly what in 3.
Yes.
I mean, I don't even know. This probably isn't the time to get into all that because we've already talked about 2.5 a lot. 3 is going to be on our schedule for quite some time. But from everything I've seen, even looking at the release notes for that.
The big ticket items are the parrot parser.
Of course.
So we can easily mention that as being there. And it's some great work that Daniel Sun's been doing. And
yes, thank you, Daniel.
Deserves lots of kudos for everything that he's been doing.
Absolutely. And that means we'll be able to, in addition to all the benefits of the parser, we'll also be able to use Java 8 syntax for lambdas and
many more things. So a whole range of use cases, even some array initialization and some other things, some do while loops, or for loops of various flavors. So there's a bunch of stuff there that if people are cut and pasting from Java, which is still one of the key selling points for Groovy is the low learning curve from Java.
Right.
If they're doing all their Lambda notation, they can just bring all that across and use that in Groovy.
Yeah. So, I mean, all this is coming. And of course, there are lots of other features that are coming as well. And we'll get into those in the podcast many times on there. Now, you gave a talk yesterday on testing with Groovy. And you did the normal thing of saying, by the way, I'm going to show you a couple of libraries. But if you look at my GitHub repository, what were there, 30, 40 libraries?
Over 40. And then if you go and look in the archive branch, you'll find another 10 or 20.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, anything you ever really want to do in practice, Paul has done, and is willing to show you examples and how this works and everything. And I've been spending a lot of time on testing over the years, and there were a dozen things there I'd never seen. I mean, it's just really good stuff,
Oh, good. Glad you enjoyed it.
That was fun. I'll talk to Baruch on the next podcast again about other talks that we saw, but were there any things that you wanted to mention, anything you've seen so far at the conference? I mean, you're wearing a Micronaut shirt, you know?
Yeah. So Micronaut's a great companion technology to Grails for people that, you know, Grails gives you the full stack solution. If you want a nice lightweight microservice solution, Micronaut's a really compelling
They released Milestone 3, was it?
Yeah. So it's still not even 1.0 final out yet, but some of the great smarts that have gone into Grails, why people sort of love using the technology, the same smarts have gone into Micronaut, and there's some really nice work that's been going on there, and I've been sitting off on the side and making sure all the Groovy supports as high quality as I can, but it's polyglot supporting, so people can use whatever their favorite language is. They'll probably end up using Groovy sometimes, and Java or Kotlin or whatever other times. That's whatever they feel is appropriate for a particular scenario.
Yeah, the startups were everything he said. Jeff Brown said in his keynote was everything was sub 2 second. Some things were sub 1 second, but the startup times were blazingly fast.
Correct. Yeah.
And the RAM requirements were very low.
So people are saying, you know, Groovy is slow. Well, here I can write a microservice in Groovy. And I can have 1 second response times. I can write the same thing in Java or Kotlin, Scala, and Spring Boot and have a 30-second start time.
Absolutely.
So, okay, Groovy's and 1 second, okay.
And if you want to deploy a microservice written in Spring Boot on a cloud provider, you're going to need a couple of gigs of RAM or more. You're going to need a lot, right? Whereas they were doing demonstrations with
tiny Raspberry Pis and all sorts of embedded scenarios.
Under 100 megs. I mean, like 10, 20 megs of RAM or something. I mean, ridiculous abilities. Now, those were simple apps, but even as they scale up, they will be very low memory requirements.
Lean and mean.
Very lean and mean. And now the thing I liked is that in addition to this coming along, Jeff said in his talk, newsworthy I thought, was that they had to do a ton of work to get Micronaut to 1.0 milestone 1 or 2. And that did pull attention away from Grails to some degree. But now that they've achieved this, the rest of the way they're all planned, and they're able to now rededicate resources back to Grails again. And they're very much hoping that Grails will go to version 4 by the end of the year, and that's going to have the Spring 5 and Spring Boot 2 support and the Java 8 requirement. So, and the other thing you mentioned, of course, is the size of the, it's not necessarily the Grails team, but at OCI, the number of people working on Groovy-related projects was up to, what, 19 now? Something like that?
And growing.
And hiring, So, any of them in Australia other than you?
Not yet. We'll have to work on that, won't we? Yeah.
One thing I do want to mention, I mean, I got to ask you, now you are based in
Brisbane, Australia.
Brisbane, which I know is pronounced Brisbane because of you.
Brisbane.
It looked like Brisbane to me. What do I know? I'm an American. The fact that I know there's a city called Brisbane is really good for an American, right?
We don't get it. We don't get offended but we just smile when many Americans call it Brisbane when they come visit.
Yeah, well, the people in the U.S. South have a good phrase they use. They say, "Bless your heart," you know. Well, which is it means something else. Yeah. But you've been there, you say, all your life, right?
Yes.
So, what got you involved in the Groovy community, being in Down Under? You know, being in that area. Was there anything that drove you? What drove you to Java? I don't really know that, or I don't know how many of the listeners know much about your background.
Okay. Well, Java and Groovy very different things. So Java, I was building health demonstrators. So I was working for a research center and...
Yeah, you have a PhD, right? In computer science, is it? Or something else?
Well, telecommunications / computer science.
Of all things. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I was object-oriented formal specification of communication protocols.
Bless you. Yeah,
so,
nice.
So there we go. And my career goal...
Communication protocol. Okay.
My career goal is the stuff that I was doing in that PhD will become relevant to industry. And we're almost there.
Oh, really?
We're almost there. So this is good. That's another...
Yeah, sure.
So anyway... To cut a long story short, I was having to rapidly build systems that would mimic what a health system of the future would look like. So this was back in early 90s, late 80s. When was it? when did Java come out? But way pre Java 1.
94 roughly. Yeah.
So this was early 90s, 91 or something.
Sure.
And it was Java 0.3 or some really early version. No one had ever heard of it before. But we were using it to hack together what, full online medical health patient records of the future would look like, with remote doctors and all the whole gamut of secure exchange of patient details and everything. So we were rapidly building these things together. And
all hot issues now. Yeah.
Yeah. And we were a research center, and we were trying to get funding to research into nutting out all the problems.
Right.
And so you'd have to go and show someone, here's what it would look like, and it was a totally fake system, but on the screen it looked like a real system was operating. We told people it's fake.
It's a rigged demo, yeah.
Fully rigged demo, but it had glimpses of some parts of the technology were real.
Sounds like Xerox PARC and all that.
It was very much like that. Yeah. And in fact, we interacted with them on a very regular basis.
Fascinating.
So anyway, that's how I came to get into Java, and then did training for Java as it became one and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, okay.
Groovy, on the other hand, I can blame Dirk for that. So
Dirk Koenig, for those who don't know, again, lead author on Groovy in Action, among many other things.
Co-author.
Lead. Now he's the co-author on Groovy Action, right?
Two.
In one, he was the lead, but in two,
we're both sharing the naming rights.
My apologies. Right.
I had to negotiate with Dirk to get that. But
well,
anyway.
you got to, got millions of dollars to split. I get it, so.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
You'd have a bigger team, wouldn't you, if that was the case? Yes.
Yeah. I can afford 2 coffees a week from my royalties, whereas you can only afford half a coffee.
Yeah, exactly.
Half a coffee a week.
And not at Starbucks, right?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so
instant coffee.
Dirk got you into Groovy?
He got me into a thing called WebTest, which was an Ant extension.
I remember that.
For testing. And I was, as part of, I was heavily involved in a lot of agile technologies, and I was promoting testing, hence my passion for testing in the talks.
Okay, so that's what triggered that too.
And I was looking for something that would give my customers nice reports on how all the tests work and everything. And web test reporting was fantastic. I mean, I don't think anyone would claim the other parts of the technology were sort of up to scratch these days, but the reporting, it's still as good as you'll get from the other tools.
Wow.
And so that's what I was looking for, and I got involved in web test and started extending that and enhancing that and doing a whole work on that.
What was that written in?
That work would have been done in Java, but it was an Ant extension.
Okay.
So people could write in initially XML would be how you configure it up, and then it would be calling into some Java code that we would have written for them.
Which that was a thing back then. Okay.
XML was a wonderful thing back then.
Yeah. All people like that. Yeah.
Those sharp angled brackets kept cutting us, but we still thought we thought the pain was a good thing or something. Anyway.
Okay.
So we did that, and then the next phase was, gosh, we need to script this. Using all this XML isn't quite the Excel spreadsheet with 100 test cases in it. We want to run that, and XML doesn't give us a way to do it. If only we had a scripting language that could,
could read Excel too.
Could easily loop through the things out of that Excel spreadsheet.
Oh my goodness!
And we looked around. We looked at Jython. We looked at JRuby. We looked at all the different ones, and there was this brand new one called Groovy that had come out, and lo and behold, it let us do all. We could read files. We could read websites. We could do all
Groovy. That's in the early 2000s, though, right?
It was very early days of Groovy.
But by then, all right.
And so then that's how we got into Groovy. It was only 1 or 2 years old when I at that stage. I didn't become a committer for like a year later, but I was using it back for a little while, and I was still working on the web test stuff. And then I decided, well, actually, this Groovy thing's got a lot more utility in the customer problems that all my customers were facing. I can make them super productive using this stuff, and so. Had many successful consultancy years showing some people in Brisbane and other parts of Australia how to use Groovy.
What led you to create, how do you pronounce it, a CERT?
A CERT existed before all of this. So it's just my own company. So it stands for Advanced Software Engineering Research and Training.
Oh, I just assumed there was an Australia in there somewhere. So it's Advanced Software
Engineering
Research and Training. Okay.
And that's sort of the heritage that I came from, and all the different roles that I've had have sort of been related to that. But it's sort of these days it's sort of like a little shelf company that sort of sits there and is mostly just myself.
And some contractors.
A little bit of stuff.
A little bit.
Yeah, not
but
much.
now you're working with OCI, of course.
That's right. Yeah.
So when did that start again? Been a couple of years, I think now.
So I think over a year, because I was last year's conference. I was OCI.
That's right. That was you were OCI last year, as I recall.
Fairly recent. Is that right?
Now you're only half time there, right?
Yeah.
Or is there some arrangement for a certain number of hours, or I mean?
Yeah, the details aren't important, but their contributions very appreciated.
Oh yeah. I mean,
and so I get to work on Groovy. So
you're the only person I know who's funded to work on the language. You know.
At the moment, yeah.
At the moment,
there's some other discussions happening, so hopefully.
Oh boy, what a teaser! Yeah, okay.
Well, don't.
No, it's a teaser. That's all right.
There's no one promising to put 10 people on the project. Don't get too excited. But it's a great community, and it's just good to see that people who have been benefiting from Groovy are sort of having a bit of a think about how they might support it going forward. So
when Pivotal decided no longer to fund all this, there were really only two casualties from my point of view. One was Groovy Grails Tool Suite kind of collapsed, which actually had collapsed a good year before they even announced, that they weren't supporting anymore. But the other thing is that there were no longer people being paid to improve the language.
Yeah.
Now, at the time, as I recall, there were only three anyway, right? It was you and Guillaume and Cedric. Although maybe Jochen as well. So there's four really.
Yeah. So 3 from Pivotal.
3 from Pivotal, and Jochen was he?
No,
you were the one who you weren't Pivotal. That's right. Yeah, because that was that whole windy path of G to 1 through Spring Source, Spring Source through VMware, through EMC, through Pivotal, through whatever. Yeah, as Jeff Brown says, his email address changed 4 times. It's basically what happened.
Okay.
But at any rate, when they left, then those other 3 had to find other jobs, and they did, of course, but they're not funded to work on Groovy anymore.
Correct.
And you kind of are.
Yeah, I am.
But you definitely are to support the OCI efforts. So for Grails and Micronaut.
I chip in a bit of my own time on top of that.
Of course, yeah. I mean, as it would. Well, great. I mean, thank you so much for being available for this. Is there anything else you wanted to bring up or mention or talk about?
No. I'm just happy for people's patience while we get. I'm happy that 2.5's out.
Oh yeah.
I'm happy that with 2.5.2 we'll hopefully have find a way.
I'll install it right away, and
most of the.
I'll try the alpha if you want or whatever.
But
we'll definitely do that.
Get you to work.
Sure. What the heck? I'm a one-person company too.
And then appreciate everyone's patience as we work towards 3, and very, very happy for any people who want to help us move that along. So,
that'd be great. Yeah, definitely. It's very friendly, as we know. The people there is a lot of help out there for those who want it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you again. I know you've got a long flight. Are you headed back to Australia today or tomorrow or whatever?
Yep, today, a couple of hours time. So.
You're going to lose a day in the process or whatever? A lot of time zones, right?
Yeah, I get no Saturday.
Oh, my God.
So I fly out here on Friday and arrive home on Sunday.
Someday I hope to get down there. I really do. It'd be wonderful to come visit down there. But in the meantime, thank you for taking the time to come all the way up here and then, sharing everything with our listeners, and we'll stay in touch, right?
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Let me hit that. So goodbye, everybody.